Welcome to another episode of Leaders Legacy. I'm your host Varsha Sarkar, and our topic for today is strategies for building a productive virtual team. Our guest here today is Liz Bronson, who is the former VP of People at Support Logic. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Thank you for having me, Varsha. I appreciate being invited.
So we all know that virtual teams have become very prominent, especially after the COVID period. In your opinion, how has this landscape of virtual teams evolved over the years, and what are the major trends that you're seeing in this realm?
Yeah, great question. So I've been virtual for 16 years. So I've done the virtual thing before it was the thing.
Wow,
And
that's really long.
I know. And so things have changed over time for sure, and different jobs have been able to be remote. Of course, we saw in 2020 that most corporate jobs could be remote. As I'm newly on the job market and looking for my next opportunity, what I've seen as a big change is that things are moving kind of back, but not fully back. So what's happening right now in the market is a year ago, like every job was remote, right? Or 2 years ago, every job was remote.
Yes.
Now it's hybrid. So it's remote, but they want you in a certain area. So what's happening is that companies want people to be back in the office. They know when they say back in the office 5 days a week, they get major attrition, right? So what they're doing is they're allowing their remote people to stay remote, but they're building clusters around office spaces or clusters in certain locations. So location has started to matter again. And so there are absolutely remote only companies, and they're doing some really interesting things, but there are also a lot of companies that are trying to build clusters in certain locations.
We have seen, actually, even I have experienced that communication could be a major problem when you're dealing with virtual teams. So, what tools and strategies have you used to eliminate this problem?
Yeah, so with virtual teams and or hybrid teams, because every hybrid team is also a virtual team, unless you have the entire team in the office all the time. You've got a virtual team, at least components of it, right? And you're absolutely correct. It's all about communication. So I believe you have to over communicate and communicate in different places. Like you have to communicate maybe on Slack and on email and in person. So you need to make sure that folks are hearing what you're saying and that they have places where they can get updated. So that may mean that you record all your meetings. It may mean that you have everyone in a meeting, whether they're on site or off site, be on Zoom with their faces. In. I think we've all learned that the person coming up through the speaker does not work and it's terrible. So you just want to create ways that people will get the information they need. So if work is passed off, maybe, with a follow the sun, that people know where to go to be updated quickly and that they don't feel in the dark. The other piece about communication, and I think over communication is absolutely key, as I said, but it's about checking in. So if I were an HR leader in an office, I'd walk around, right? I would be saying, hey, Varsha, how you doing? How's it going? Just talking to you. Remote, I can't see, I'm never going to run into you, right? So I have to make a point to run into you. And so whether you're a manager, a project manager, a leader, you have to make an overt effort to check in with people and to see them. So one thing that I do, I truly believe that HR strategy is about treating people like human beings and seeing them for the humans they are. So I checked in with everybody at our company a few times a year, and they got used to it. They stopped being scared of that check-in on their calendar. Oh no, the evil HR lady's coming. But it was just hey, how's it going? What's going well for you? What would you improve if you had a magic wand? Like what's your experience as an employee?
So would this be in the form of emails, or would you actually block the calendar saying just checking in?
just checking in, block the calendar. And
Okay.
again, it could be a 15-minute call. You know, a lot of people like, they don't want to chit chat, but they just knew enough that someone cared. And as an HR leader, that also opened the door that if they had a problem, I was approachable because they already, right? So, but you know, when people say, oh, I don't need the one-on-one, I saw them yesterday, that doesn't happen remote. So your one-on-ones are critical. It is critical to show your people that you care, to hear what they're doing, to find out what their workload's like. You know, I know if Jane is staying in the office, it gets in the office at 7 a.m. and isn't leaving till 10. I know that, right? I don't know that if Jane is working at home. So checking in on workloads, checking in on expectations, like really understanding both what the person's experience is today and also where they want to go with their career. Checking in a remote first environment is critical.
As a recruiter, when you're hiring for a virtual team, what are the key factors that you're looking in a person so that you know that they will be a good fit for your virtual team or a hybrid team?
Great question. So when I'm recruiting for a remote role, the question I ask it is, how do you make remote work for you?
Okay. What if they have no experience with it? Then what do you do?
We all have experience with it at this point, right? Like if they say I've never worked remotely, then I would be like, really? Okay. But if they don't, I would ask, you know, what do you think? You think it would work for you? What do you think? And I then ask, what do you think? What do you need to be supported remotely? What's worked well for you in the past? What hasn't worked well in the past? So really asking them behavioral questions about their experience and what they like about working remote, what they don't. For a lot of us, as you know, I'm a caregiver, I have 2 children. Working remote for all these years has helped me be the mom I need to be. My clients or the companies I worked with never suffered for that, right? So people need remote to fit work into their life in a good way. And so they know how to do it and they know what works. So I think it's about listening. I think it's about asking the question and seeing. If someone says, I've always hated being remote and it doesn't work for me, then they should
person's a no.
Vote first company. Like it just is a place for them. But for some people, it's ideal.
Right. Also, productivity could be a major concern for members who are working remotely. Can you share a few tips where how you set clear goals when you're monitoring the performance of a remote team? What guidelines have you used?
So again, this is about communication. So if I say to you, Varsha, I have this project for you, and then we talk about the project and the expectations, and maybe we set some milestones. And I say, how long do you think that'll take you? And you're like, oh, 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I would have thought it would take 2 days. What do you think is going to take so long? Because we have to remember as managers, sometimes we think something is easier than it is. Right? No problem. Oh, just patch it. And in fact, under the hood of the car, it's a lot more complicated, right? So you may be then teaching me, well, in order to do this, first I have to do this, this, and this. And so we're level setting and expectation setting. So it may not be that you're sitting around watching TV all day. It may be that the project I've just assigned you is more complex than I thought. So again, if you communicate, if you check in, if you set expectations from the beginning, set milestones, then you understand what the person is doing. I think productivity is, in most jobs, it's pretty random. It's pretty arbitrary. And so I may, as a manager, may think that I know how much work you have or what it takes, but I may not know that 10 people around the company are constantly calling you for help. So in those one-on-ones, when I have someone working for me, so what have you been up to? What's keeping you busy? What are you enjoying? What are you not? Like, you may not look productive to me. I have no idea about those people constantly calling you and distracting you. So I should know. And we should have that open line of communication.
Right.
So I think people rush to the productivity thing when they don't understand what someone does.
Exactly. I guess in certain companies, for certain teams, they have set number of KPIs and things to follow. But I have also noticed teams that don't have that, and it can
Yeah,
be quite difficult to gauge their productivity, right?
right.
Yeah,
And those KPIs should be agreed to, right? And so if
exactly.
I have those KPIs and I believe in setting goals and milestones and all of those
Mm-hmm.
things for people, then I can monitor it better. But also sometimes we set something and we don't know all the hurdles that are going to come. And so we have to reassess. Like those things should always be written in pencil, like because of the unknown.
Yeah. But another thing I noticed is remote work. I know a lot of people undermine it, but some people tend to feel very isolated and quite burnt out in a remote work atmosphere because there is no cooler talk, there's no gossip in the office, you don't get to celebrate the festivals. So, how do you counter that in a remote work atmosphere? How do you let people socialize?
Well, first of all, I think for some people, they're like, sweet, no office parties. Like they're, the introverts rejoice, right?
Yes.
But again, you have to know yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
I one of the main, tenets that I believe in is that adults need to adult.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have a very great social life outside of work. If I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
remote work would be super isolating and I
Yes.
wouldn't enjoy it, right? So I need to, as an employee and as a human and as an adult, I need to
Mm-hmm.
take care of myself, assess what I need, and make sure I get it. That's not my employer.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I think an employer can definitely build engagement, build connection. There's lots of stuff you did. I'm so proud of all the culture work I did at Support Logic to bring people together and give them opportunities to get to know each other. Because again, I'm not going to meet you because we have the same coffee break schedule.
Yes. Yes.
So that has to be our connection has to be mindfully made, assuming that we
Mm-hmm.
don't naturally work together. But
But have you
for
come across or have you designed policies where you need to gauge an employee's mental health or if they are being depressed or feeling burnt out? How do you gauge that?
Well, remember those one-on-ones I told you about?
Right.
It's really good to gauge that, people,
Mm-hmm.
when you build relationships and you ask
Mm-hmm.
someone how they are in a genuine, safe space, they tell
Mm-hmm.
you. But again, adults need to adult. So if I'm feeling
Right.
burnt out, I need to tell, or overwhelmed or whatever, I need to tell my boss that that's how I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling and why. Right. And so I think you can also create a bunch of things for people to come to and do. Some will, some won't. I
Right.
also think that like Slack and Teams and like off-topic channels and like fun
Mm-hmm.
can happen in those places for those who need it and want it and crave connection. So there's a lot you can do as an employer and there's a lot you can't do. But, you talked about depression or mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
One thing an employer can do is have solid benefits for that
Right. Right.
and support people that way. But I can't force somebody to go seek out
Mm-hmm.
counseling. I want to say that's above my pay grade, but that broaches the line of
Of
personal
course. Of
responsibility.
course.
So I can encourage and I can encourage them to take the time they need, but I can't
Mm-hmm.
force someone to take care of themselves.
Right. One more bonus question I wanted to ask you. Uh, if a new company wants to enter remote work, they have no experience whatsoever, what would be one tip that you'd suggest them?
That well, first of all, know what you're doing
Mm-hmm.
because from an HR perspective, every state or country that you're in, you need to be registered in. You need to have an entity. You don't have to have a separate entity in every state,
Right.
but you need to be registered in every state.
Mm-hmm.
Every state is different. Certain states have certain mandates.
Right.
So to say we have everywhere is a huge paperwork burden. So for the
Okay.
person who's like, number one person at the company, I'm doing this, like think about the logistical stuff and the laws
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand and all of that. Like that is really, really important. Because a lot of, when I got to Support Logic, we had what's called a PEO, basically
Mm-hmm.
you let somebody else kind of take care of all that, and they had messed
Right.
everything up. So you have to really make sure you're setting yourself up legally and compliantly for success. So I would say that's number one. And then number two is think about the how. How do you do things? How do you pass along information? How are you setting up your folders and your shared drives and all of those things to make sure that everyone who needs access to whatever has it?
Right.
The worst thing you can do in remote is lack of clarity. Like, I don't know where to find that. I don't know, that is the worst. So you really have to take an organized approach and think about the experience of the person sitting in their home office or whatever, trying to get their job done. What are they going to need? And so that's how you build your operations around someone being able to be self-sufficient and find stuff for themselves.
Right. Okay.
Clarity.
Thanks.
All about clarity.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Liz, for this lovely conversation. Thank you for giving us the time. Our viewers definitely got to learn something new, right?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite topics. Thanks for having me.
That concludes our episode. If you like it, please do like, subscribe our channel, Leaders Legacy. Until next time.